It was a warm afternoon on June 9, 2017. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign was buzzing with life like any other summer day. Students strolled through campus, chatting, laughing, completely unaware that something chilling was unfolding just a few blocks away. Yingying Zhang, a 26-year-old visiting scholar from China, had just finished checking out a few apartments. She was excited about her future, bright, passionate, and endlessly kind. Yingying had arrived in the US just weeks earlier to study plant sciences. It was her first time far from home, and she often sent sweet voice messages to her family, telling them how much she missed them, but also how hopeful she felt. That afternoon, Yingying was running late for a meeting with a leasing agent. She sent a quick text to inform them she was on her way, then stepped onto a campus bus. At 1:39 p.m., she got off at a stop along North Goodwin Avenue. Surveillance cameras captured her standing at the curb, waiting. She looked slightly lost, her phone in one hand, backpack slung over her shoulder. Minutes passed. Then, a black Saturn Astra slowly pulled up beside her. The car stopped. Yingying leaned toward the window, briefly spoke to the driver, then opened the door and got in. And just like that, she vanished.
His attorneys are trying to attack the credibility of that recording. Christensen's ex-wife testified that she picked him up for a ride that same night and said he was noticeably drunk.
When Yingying didn't show up to her appointment, the leasing agent was confused. Hours later, friends started calling her, texting, panicking. She wasn't responding. By evening, her absence had sparked real concern. Calls to hospitals, campus police, even the embassy. Nothing. There was no sign of her. Her phone had gone silent. She hadn't returned to her apartment. She hadn't contacted anyone. Yingying Zhang was officially reported missing. The university police began reviewing surveillance footage immediately. They spotted her getting off the bus, standing on the curb, and then the black Saturn Astra pulling up. But the license plate was hard to make out, and the driver was completely obscured. Still, investigators now had a lead. Someone had picked her up, but who? The search became massive. Posters with Yingying's face went up all over campus and the city. Her bright smile, now a haunting reminder of how quickly life can shift into nightmare. The Chinese consulate got involved, so did the FBI. Days passed, then weeks, but there was still no trace of Yingying, no phone activity, no credit card use, no social media, just silence. Meanwhile, the FBI was quietly making progress. They narrowed down a list of registered black Saturn Astras in the area. There weren't many, just 18 in the entire region, and one stood out almost immediately. A 27-year-old former physics graduate student named Brent Christensen. He lived nearby, had no solid alibi for the afternoon Yingying disappeared, and when questioned, he claimed he couldn't remember much of that day.
Michelle Zortman describes her ex-husband as a man with a bad drinking problem that derailed their marriage. The day Yingying Zhang went missing, Zortman was out of town on a trip with another man to the Wisconsin Dells, the same spot where she and Christensen went on their honeymoon.
Which immediately raised red flags. The FBI dug deeper. They searched his apartment, but found no direct evidence. Still, something about him felt off, so they did something drastic. Brent Christensen's phone had been tapped, and not just that. The FBI asked his girlfriend to wear a wire. They wanted to know what he'd say when he thought no one was listening. What came next would shatter everyone. During a vigil held for Yingying, yes, a vigil, Brent Christensen was heard boasting to his girlfriend that he was the one who killed her. He described how he had lured Yingying into his car, took her back to his apartment, held her against her will, and then in cold detail, he admitted to what he did. He said she fought.
He was upset about it, she testified today. When she returned home a couple days later, she says Christensen showed her a blood stain on his mattress that she had not seen before. He said it was a nosebleed, she said, later adding it was sizable. The FBI found Zhang's DNA on Christensen's mattress.
That she was strong, brave, but he was stronger. He spoke of the moment he choked her out, how it didn't work, so he hit her in the head with a baseball bat. Over and over. And when she still showed signs of life, he did something even worse. He stabbed her, mutilated her, until she stopped breathing. And then, he disposed of her remains. His voice was calm.
That the Monday after Zhang's disappearance, she saw Christensen leave their apartment with a huge duffel bag, but it didn't appear much was inside.
Emotionless, as if recounting a story, not a life he had destroyed. The FBI had heard enough. He was arrested days later. But the horror didn't end there. Even after his arrest, Brent refused to reveal where Yingying's body was. He simply wouldn't say. That, more than anything, tormented her family. Her mother and father had flown from China, praying to see their daughter one more time. Instead, they were met with silence, a wall of evil that would not break, no final goodbye, no grave to mourn beside, just a haunting absence.
I want to bring my daughter home, pleaded Jung's mother.
In court, the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded confessions, the timeline, the car, the lies, but perhaps the most haunting detail was the fact that before killing Ying Ying, Brent Christensen had been obsessively visiting forums dedicated to serial killers. He had read about Ted Bundy and others, and he had told people he wanted to become notorious. He even ranked himself, bragging that Ying Ying was his 13th victim, but there was no evidence of 12 others. Was he lying, or was there more? To this day, we still don't know. The trial lasted weeks. Ying Ying's family sat through every moment, devastated. They heard how she had been kind, soft-spoken, a brilliant mind who only wanted to learn and grow. They heard how she had been tricked, overpowered, and ultimately erased. In July 2019, Brent Christensen was found guilty. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision on the death penalty, so he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But still, he refused to say where Ying Ying's body was. Years have passed. Ying Ying Zhang's remains have never been found. Her family returned to China, carrying only her photos, her memories, her dreams left unfulfilled. They never got to say goodbye. Her father once said, "She's out there somewhere alone, and we don't know where to bring her flowers." Those words echo through time, a grief without end. Ying Ying's story is one of stolen potential, of trust shattered by pure evil, of a family torn apart, halfway across the world, with no closure. And Brent Christensen, he sits behind bars, silent, no remorse, no explanation, only darkness. But we remember Ying Ying, not for how she died, but for how she lived. Her passion, her courage, her kindness. Fade, and may her final farewell not be forgotten. Truck stops, restless engines, blinking neon lights, and travelers from all walks of life trying to catch their breath on endless highways. For most, it's just a pit stop, a place to refuel, grab a coffee, maybe call home. But for some, it becomes a place where everything goes dark, where a simple stop turns into a nightmare. In 2013, authorities would uncover a horror hidden in plain sight. A rolling prison, a semi-truck turned into a torture chamber, and behind the wheel, a man whose evil spanned decades. His name was Timothy J. Vafiedes, but among law enforcement and the victims he left in his wake, he would become known by a far more chilling name: the Truck Stop Killer. Timothy wasn't some notorious serial killer everyone recognized. He blended in. He kept his hair long, wore glasses, looked like just another tired trucker hauling freight across America. But behind that plain exterior was a mind that was twisted, calculating, and deeply disturbed. He didn't choose random victims. He hunted for the vulnerable. Young women, alone, desperate, sometimes homeless, sometimes just naive. And once he spotted them, he offered them help, a ride, a place to sleep, maybe even a job. But once they stepped into his truck, they didn't leave. At least, not for a long, long time. One of his victims was his own niece. Yes, his blood relative. In May 2013, he convinced her to travel with him in his truck. She had nowhere to go, and he promised her food, shelter, protection. She trusted him, but almost immediately, things turned dark. The moment the truck door shut behind her, she became a prisoner. He took her phone, her ID, and then he began the transformation. He shaved her head, took a dental tool, and began grinding down her teeth. He wanted to change her appearance, so no one would recognize her, if she ever escaped. He controlled every part of her life, what she wore, when she ate, when she slept. He forced her to sleep chained up in the cab. If she resisted, he beat her. If she cried, he reminded her that no one was coming. For 6 months, she lived like this, a ghost, trapped inside a truck barreling across the country. But she wasn't the only one. When authorities finally looked deeper into Vafiad's background, they found a horrifying pattern. He had a history of kidnapping and abuse that stretched back decades. In 1999, he had married a 19-year-old woman. Within days, he began physically assaulting her. He wouldn't let her leave the house. He isolated her from her family. Sound familiar? She tried to escape, but every time, he pulled her back. Eventually, she vanished from public view. Years passed, no one heard from her again. Investigators believe there were many more victims, women he picked up at truck stops, gas stations, side-of-the-road diners. Some he manipulated into coming with him. Others he simply forced. He changed their names, shaved their heads, filed down their teeth so they couldn't even smile like themselves anymore. He wanted to erase them, piece by piece, and he nearly got away with it. So how did it all come crashing down? In November 2013, he made a mistake. He tried to enter Canada. At the Sweetgrass, Montana border crossing, customs agents noticed something off. His niece, still traveling with him, looked terrified. She wouldn't make eye contact. Her hair was cut short, her teeth ruined, and her ID didn't match her face. Agents pulled them aside for questioning. That's when the truth began to unravel. She told them everything. 6 months of abuse, the beatings, the restraints, the endless driving from state to state, the moments when she thought she'd die in the back of that truck. Agents searched the vehicle, and what they found was shocking. Chains, restraints, tools, fake IDs, wigs, even files on other women. It wasn't just about this one niece. He had done this before, many times. Vafiad's was immediately arrested. He was charged with kidnapping, transporting a minor across state lines, and interstate domestic violence. But the deeper authorities dug, the worse it got. He had meticulously documented his abuse. He kept journals, videos, even dental records. He recorded his own crimes like trophies. Each page, another scream that no one had heard. In court, Vafiad's tried to play it calm. He didn't deny much, because he knew the evidence was overwhelming. But he never apologized, never explained, just silence, as if none of it really mattered to him. His niece testified bravely. She recounted the horrific details of her captivity, the pain, the fear, the hopelessness. She survived, but the scars will never fully fade. And what about the others? Some women have come forward since, some remain missing. Law enforcement believes there may be at least a dozen victims, maybe more, but not all of them live to tell their stories. Some may still be out there, nameless, forgotten, buried under the weight of a country's blind spots. In 2016, Vafiad's was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. For some, it wasn't enough. After all the pain he caused, the lives he shattered, 35 years felt like a footnote. But for others, it was a small measure of justice. He would never see freedom again. No more highways, no more victims, just cold gray walls, and the silence he once forced on others, now his own. What makes the story of Timothy J. Vafiad so terrifying isn't just what he did, it's how long he did it, how many people he fooled, how many rest stops and border crossings and motel clerks looked into that truck and saw nothing. It's the silence, the ordinary face, the monster hiding in plain sight. He turned a place of rest into a place of terror, and no one knew until it was almost too late. We remember his victims, not as statistics, but as survivors, women who fought, endured, and in some cases escaped the unimaginable. Their courage, their voices, are what truly brought the truck stop killer to justice. And as for Vafiad's, he'll never drive again, never choose another victim, never hurt another soul. He's locked away, but the scars he left behind still ride the highways. If you stop at a truck stop late at night, take a look around. The monsters aren't always hiding in the shadows. Sometimes, they're behind the wheel.
A young girl is missing in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and no one can find her.
She was only 20 years old, bright, hopeful, filled with dreams that hadn't yet unfolded. Heather Elvis was like many young women, figuring out life, navigating independence, chasing the future one day at a time.
She loved working. I don't know what it was about Heather, but work was her driving force. But her passion was doing makeup. She was very artsy, and that's what she really loved.
And then, one cold December night in 2013, she vanished, without warning, without a trace. No one heard a scream, no one saw her leave, no body was ever found. All that was left was a car, parked at an empty boat landing, a phone, gone silent, and 1,000 questions that still haunt her family today. This is the story of Heather Elvis, and the final glimpse she left behind. Heather grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a coastal town known for sunshine, tourists, and secrets. She was bubbly, friendly, the kind of girl who laughed loudly and loved fiercely. She worked as a hostess at a local restaurant, trying to build a life on her own after moving out of her parents' house. It wasn't easy, but she was proud. She had friends, dreams, a new apartment, and she had a crush. That crush would change everything. His name was Sidney Moorer, a married man in his late 30s. He worked at the same restaurant as a maintenance guy, and Heather, young and impressionable.
Brianna says they met when Sidney was hired to do maintenance work at her job. Even though Sidney was 38, almost twice Heather's age, it was love at first sight, at least for Heather.
Fell hard. They started flirting, then texting, then an affair. It wasn't just physical. Heather thought it was real. She believed Sidney was going to leave his wife, Tammy. She even told her friends that he loved her. But there was a problem. Tammy found out, and when she did, the situation spiraled into something no one could have imagined. Tammy Moorer was not a woman to be crossed. She was furious, not just at her husband, but at Heather. She began harassing her, sending threatening texts, mocking her on social media, even forcing Sidney to send Heather a breakup message while Tammy dictated it. In that message, Sidney told Heather never to contact him again, that their relationship meant nothing, that he was going back to his wife. Heather was devastated, heartbroken, but not just because of the breakup. She was scared. She confided in friends that Tammy had threatened her, said awful things, made her feel unsafe, and then, just days before she vanished, Heather tweeted something eerie. Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well. No one knew. That would be one of her last messages to the world. December 17th, 2013. Heather went on a first date with a young guy, trying to move on, start fresh. They had dinner, laughed. He dropped her off at her apartment around 1:15 a.m. He watched her go inside, safe. By all accounts, the night had gone well, but just an hour later, Heather's phone rang. It was a call from Sidney Moorer, a call that would set off a chain of events. No one could stop. Phone records show Heather and Sidney talked briefly just after 1:30 a.m. Then there were more calls, back and forth, some lasting seconds, some minutes. At 3:41 a.m., Heather tried to call her roommate. She didn't answer, and at 3:44 a.m., Heather's phone made its last outgoing call to Sidney. After that, silence.
To a police timeline, Heather then left her apartment and drove to the Peachtree Landing, a popular place for fishermen and kayakers.
Later that morning, Heather's green Dodge Intrepid was found abandoned at Peachtree Landing, a remote boat dock along the Waccamaw River. Her purse, phone, and keys were missing, but the car wasn't damaged. It looked as if it had been parked calmly, like she meant to come back, but never did.
It's Heather Elvis's car, registered to her father, Terry. What did you find when you got here?
I came with the officer to identify the car and to open it for him. I had the spare keys to it.
There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no footprints, no witnesses. Heather Elvis had simply disappeared.
Phone records show she pinged there at 3:38 a.m. It was the last time anyone heard anything from Heather.
Her family was frantic. They immediately reported her missing. Flyers went up. Search parties formed. Volunteers combed the woods, the water, the marshes. But days passed, then weeks, and no sign of Heather. The only clue, the strange pattern of phone calls, and the history with Sidney and Tammy Moorer. Police began digging deeper, and what they found was disturbing. Surveillance footage from that night showed a truck matching Sydney's pulling out of his driveway. Around the same time, Heather's phone pinged at Peachtree Landing. He claimed he was just out getting a drink, but investigators weren't buying it. Even more damning, Tammy and Sydney had deleted data from their phones, and Tammy had been searching online for things like how to erase a cell phone. What can police recover from deleted texts? Eventually, police gathered enough evidence to make arrests. In February 2014, both Sydney and Tammy Moorer were charged with kidnapping and obstruction of justice. The community was stunned, but no one was more devastated than Heather's parents. They wanted one thing: to know where their daughter was. The trials would drag on for years. Sydney was tried first for obstruction of justice. He was convicted in 2017 for lying to police, but the jury couldn't reach a verdict on the kidnapping charge. Tammy was then tried in 2018. In court, the prosecution laid out a chilling timeline. They claimed Tammy had forced Sydney to lure Heather to Peachtree Landing that night, that the couple had gone together, confronted Heather, and made her disappear forever. Tammy's defense insisted she had nothing to do with it, that there was no proof Heather was harmed, that no body meant no crime, but the jury didn't buy it. Tammy Moorer was found guilty of kidnapping and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. A year later, Sydney was retried and also found guilty of kidnapping. He too received 30 years. Still, neither of them would ever say what happened that night. They never confessed, never gave Heather's family closure. To this day, her body has never been found, and yet, the story doesn't end there. Heather's family, especially her father, Terry Elvis, never stopped searching. Every year they hold vigils, walk the riverbank, pray for answers. They believe someone, somewhere, still knows something. Maybe even more people were involved. Maybe someone helped cover it up. And the scariest part? They might be right. There are still questions, still gaps in the timeline, still pieces that don't quite fit. But one thing is certain: Heather Elvis didn't just vanish. She was taken by people who silenced her and then refused to tell the truth. The pain her family lives with is hard to imagine. Every missed birthday, every Christmas without her smile, every time the phone rings, and it's not her. A mother left wondering what her daughter's last moments were like. A father haunted by the thought that maybe he could have protected her. Heather's story is not just about what was lost. It's about what remains: love, grief, and the desperate hope that one day someone will speak. So if you ever find yourself driving through Myrtle Beach, past the lights, the waves, the laughter, remember Peachtree Landing and the girl whose car was left there. One cold December morning, the girl who smiled through pain, who believed in love, who trusted the wrong person and paid the ultimate price. Her name was Heather Elvis, and her final goodbye was just a passing glimpse that never came back.